Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hold on, let me put you all onto gallery view because then I can see you, which you may not like, but I do. So last week, Joe looked at accessibility and talked us through the fact that through Jesus dying, we now have access to God. And that's great. And that really is good news. And sort of before Jesus, the sort of Old Testament times and everything, you know, it was all through the sacrifices and it was all about sort of what you did. But then Jesus came and we don't need to do that anymore because we have this free pass, this unlimited access to God. And that's great. And I was just reflecting on that this week. I didn't get to hear Joe's talk until about middle of this week, I think, when I was driving, and I listened to it, and it just made me think, yes, that is great, and we celebrate that. But I wonder what barriers we put in the way to that accessibility, that amazing thing that Jesus did. How we actually put obstacles in people's paths, and how we hinder people really taking advantage of that accessibility. You know, it's when we think about accessibility, we often think about sort of wheelchair accessibility and building accessibility, the doors wide enough and all of that sort of thing. And there are obvious blocks that stop people getting places, but there are also less obvious ones. And I just want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the sort of maybe less obvious ones, the ones that we have come to just accept and that we don't really think about and that we don't really realize might be barriers. Barriers to some being able to access the good news in the way that we can on a Sunday morning. So and then once I've just gone through my list, which is by no means exhaustive, it's just a list of things that I came up with this week. There may well be others, and we're going to get a chance actually at the end to sort of talk through. I'm going to put up some questions, and we'll split into breakout rooms, and we'll just have an opportunity to talk through some of the barriers and ways of overcoming them, and then we'll come back together. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of my list, and the other thing I want to say is I don't want this to come across as having me really sort of having a dig at the church or at traditional church or at our church or at individuals within our church family, because most of the barriers that I've acknowledged here, I am guilty of as well as anybody else, and so please don't think that I'm sort of knocking us or knocking you. It's not at all. But I just think this is quite important that we recognize what barriers we do put in the way of anybody else, Joe Bloggs or Frida, I don't know who, coming and experiencing Jesus. So, as I say, in no particular order of priority or anything, the first one I'm going to talk about is time, okay, and how the time of our service might be a barrier to some. Sunday mornings, okay, our church meets on a Sunday morning. So does, I think, every other church in Buxton. That just seems a little bit crazy to me, because for some people, Sunday mornings, maybe they're working, maybe they're a shop worker, okay, or maybe they do shift work, or maybe like Max, I think a couple of weeks ago, you said that you do night shifts and that it's actually quite hard for you to get to church, physical church, on a Sunday morning. And of course it is. You've just been working all night. You know, you want to come home, you want to rest, you want to sleep. And yet the only time we do church is on a Sunday morning. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Also, it's just a little bit, I feel a little bit contradictory when we sort of say, oh, Sunday is the Sabbath. It's a day of rest. It's a day when we should be spending time with our family. When maybe for some of us, it's our one opportunity of the week to have a lie-in. I don't know. And then we go and stick church in it's, do you get what I'm saying? I don't know. It just seems a little bit odd that Sunday morning is the only time for people to access church. Another thing is location. Church, and not necessarily our church, but often church, the location they choose or even the building that they meet in can actually cause a barrier to be put up. Maybe a church meets in a sort of out of town warehouse or something like that you have to drive to, which is great if you drive, but if you don't, it's a barrier in the way. Maybe the building is a bit imposing. A lot of sort of your traditional Anglican churches, Catholic churches, you know, they're amazing, incredible structures, but to someone on the outside, to walk across that threshold is actually a pretty scary thing. Now, that doesn't apply to our particular church. You know, we've been meeting pre-COVID in the Source, which is in a great location, accessible to a lot of people. It's got wide doors. You know, Shannon, you were able to get in there when you were in a wheelchair. But one of the things that makes it not accessible is the fact that when we're all crammed in there, there's no room for anybody else. And anybody walking down who might sort of think, oh, I wonder what's going on in there, one look through the doors and, oh, it's full already. That's not great. It's not great to have space for people to fit. Another barrier, as I say, I'm just going through these really quickly because really it's all of us in our chat rooms at the end. We're going to get a chance to talk them through. One of the biggest barriers I come across, which isn't one that we have necessarily put up, I don't think, but it's sort of apathy amongst the population, the people that we are meeting. The people who don't yet know the good news. There's this sort of general apathy, this disinterest about God. And they may well say, and people say it to me, you know, oh, it's okay for you, you know, and great, that's great that it works for you, but, you know, I'm just not interested. And that's a big barrier that we need to sort of try and get over somehow. And I was thinking about this and trying to think, you know, how do we broach that? And I've got a couple of silly examples. Okay, if let's say, I'm going to see who I can pick on here. Let's say Fran, that you go to a weekly or monthly. Let's say it wouldn't be weekly. Let's say you're in a club. Okay, and it's a flower arranging club. Now, if you say to, let's say, Andy Hamill, is he still with us or has he left us? I think he's gone actually. Oh, no, he's there. He's just turned his video off, so I can't see his face. If you say to Andy, you know, oh, how about coming along to my flower arranging club? I can't see Andy being that interested. Now, maybe I've got him wrong. I don't see him as that much of a gardener. And, you know, flower arranging is not his thing. We all know, those of us who know Andy, thank you, Andy. that it's got to be football for him. So if for example, Fran, at your flower arranging club, you could get Brian Clough to come along and do some sort of evening chat about why he thinks flower arranging is important, then you might be able to get Andy along to that, and that might suck him in, because he then sort of finds someone he respects and that he sort of idolizes to a certain extent, who is into flower arranging, and think, oh, well, there must be something in it then, because if Brian wants to do it, then maybe I should think about it. Or if let's take someone like Sam Bradbrook, who's also not on camera. I'm hoping he's there. I think he goes to a Taekwondo club, used to anyway. If Sam invited, I don't know, Sue invited you to go along to his Taekwondo, or Sylvia, or I don't know, or me, to go along to his Taekwondo, we might sort of think, no, that's it's great for you, Sam, and it's great for your mental health, and it's great for your physical strength, and it's great for your discipline with your kids. Well, I'm hoping it's not too great for that, but it's not for me, and it's not for Sue, and so what I'm trying to say is that our Sunday mornings, that they are a little bit like a club, whether we like it or not, because we all get sort of very familiar with it, and we all like what we do on a Sunday morning, and we need to find a hook to snare people, if you like. That sounds a little bit. I was talking to Joe yesterday and this morning, and we don't like the term hook. We need to come up with something different, but that's all I've got at the moment. Something that will actually grab people's attention and help them to think, oh, this might actually be something that is relevant to me, that I can get something out of, because we know that it's relevant to them. We know it's relevant to everybody. We know that, but it's convincing other people that what we know is relevant is actually. So there's those, and then once people have come in, have sort of crossed that threshold, I think there are still barriers, one of the obvious ones to me is this one size fits all approach that we seem to have. And I don't really know why we have it, but we just sort of assume that what we do in our club is going to suit everybody from every background. And I think it's fairly clear that it doesn't, because something that we are comfortable with, someone who's never been in a church before isn't going to understand sort of what they have to do and how they have to behave. And I think there's a reason that churches, and not necessarily ours, but churches are pretty much full of the middle classes, because the format, the style, the way it's done, what it looks like, the middle classes are comfortable with. But as I say, I'm not knocking anyone. I'm just throwing this out there. Do we need to think about having a bit more variety, not expecting one format, one thing to suit everybody? In some ways, it's obvious that, like, having a Sunday morning where maybe we've got prayers going on and we've got a talk going on, it's not going to be great for a single mum or a single dad and his young kids to walk into, is it? Because we're going to be, or they're going to feel like they're interrupting something. If there's periods of silence, it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It's one of the things that I think we've become very good at, and me as much as anybody, is the disapproving glance. The look sort of out of the corner of your eye, the turned head looking over your shoulder, looking behind you. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we've been in some sort of really super spiritual state, in some prayer time or in a really quiet period in the worship or something like that, and we're really close to God, and this kid behind us sort of, I don't know, shouts out, "Dad, Mum," or something, or "No, it's mine," and they're having a fight with their brother or sister, and you do the disapproving glance, and I've been that parent who's had that child, and I've been sat at the back, and you are painfully aware that it's a quiet period in the service, and you are painfully aware that your child has just made a great big noise and you wish they hadn't. You don't need people looking over their shoulder at you, and giving you this sort of, "Oh, can't they control their child?" look. And we do it. And probably all of us are guilty of doing that. And it may not be for a child. It might be, the person who walks in through the door while we're just sort of starting the service or something, and they're dressed inappropriately, in our opinion. I mean, what is appropriate dress to come into the presence of Jesus, for a start? But, we have our, like Joe talked about last week with the old couple and the veteran who'd walked in, or I can't remember. We have standards that we think others should adhere to, and that puts barriers in the way. And it makes me question how welcoming we are really to others. How many other experiences are there going to be where people come in once and they're on the receiving end of a couple of tuts from people, or that disapproving glance, or whatever it may be, but there's something that makes them realize they're not welcome as they are. And yeah, so there's that, sort of this one size fits all, and that size of sort of thing. Another thing that I think we are guilty of, and I'm guilty of as well, is the language that we use in our churches. It's not language that you would necessarily use outside of church. It's talking about sin. Now, sin is not an outside of church word. It's a word that people sort of think, well, what is that then? They don't understand it. I love singing songs, hymns that, "How great thou art." It's amazing. It's a great song. I really, love singing it out, singing my heart out, but it's using old language that is a barrier. Whether we may really like it, our club may really enjoy singing it together, getting a rousing rendition going, but it will be a barrier to some. When we read the Bible, the version that we read, that can be a barrier to people. We're actually using more and more modern versions these days. When I do things for Little Church, I use something called the easy to read version or easy readers version. And it's actually, it's a very sort of accurate translation, but it uses simpler words than some of our more traditional translations. When we, Sue often, so at the end of the prayers, and this is great. You sort of say something like, oh, we'll finish with the Lord's Prayer. Let's say the Lord's Prayer together. Or maybe whoever's hosting the meeting at the end says, let's finish with the grace. That's great, except we know it, but a lot of people don't. And if they are there, if someone joins via Zoom, or if they come in off the street and they're there, and suddenly they can't join in with something that everybody else is joining in with, that acts as a barrier. It's a simple one to solve. We just need to have the words up on the screen. And that's my fault that I haven't actually done that. And I sort of keep thinking, oh yeah, I must do that one day. So that the next time Sue says at the end of her prayers, let's say the grace, or let's say the Lord's Prayer together, I can put some words up. And in some ways, until people are coming in, until people are joining, it's not necessary. But the problem is, if we wait until they are coming in and they are joining, then it's too late, because I can't quickly run up a slide and get it up there in time. So it's sort of about having the right preparation and being ready, I guess. And that's sort of where we're at. And there have actually been, with all this sort of COVID stuff and whatever, there have been some prophetic words shared about being ready. And I think what I really want to encourage as we go into groups in a minute is for us to ask these questions and to see, has COVID presented us with an opportunity to do things differently when we come out the other side? Is this an opportunity? Is God turning something that is bad, is he going to turn it into something that's good? There's those of you who have been with us for a while, and you know that our church is part of the Catalyst group of churches, and that's headed up by a guy called Simon Holly. And back in July, he sent out a few prophetic words that all sort of linked together, that had been shared with him. And I just want to read one of them. It's very short. That was brought to the UK apostolic leaders of all the different spheres of New Frontiers. Back in April, this word was brought, and from a guy called Guy Miller. He said, I've been stirred prophetically for the last week or so. I saw a huge wave moving across the globe. This is not a wave to be ignored or for the church to duck under, but rather for the church to awaken in prayer and paddle furiously after God to ride it. What I clearly saw was behind this wave, another much, much bigger, a monster is forming. There will be a respite between the two waves where people may go back to normal. But we must encourage the church to swim out into deeper water, not stay on the beach of what has been before and is familiar, so that we can rise above this wave of destruction and so that we can deliver life to many in the aftermath. And there were two parts of that that were highlighted, two parts of that prophecy. The bit where it says not to stay on the beach of what has been before and is familiar, And the second bit, so that we can deliver life to many in the aftermath. Now, we're not actually the ones who do deliver life. That comes from God, but he uses us, and it speaks to me of us seeing this as an opportunity, and of thinking, okay, post-COVID, what can our church look like that is going to actually deliver life, bring life? And my questions are, how can we remove barriers that we have inadvertently and undeliberately put up, that have prevented people accessing the good news? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. It's going to put some, actually, I don't know if this will work. If I put everybody into groups, I don't know if you'll see the shared screen. Hopefully you will. What I'm going to do is put you all into some groups, and then I'll do a shared screen, and you'll just have to give me the thumbs up if you can see it. So when I do this, you will all get options, a little thing to follow on your screen that says, you're being invited to this room. And we've got a few of us, so I think I'll put us into 3 rooms. And if I click on this, hopefully now you've all had an invitation.